Localizing your app and managing all the string resources can be quite a difficult task. Luckily, with Xcode 15 and string catalogs, this became so much easier. And today I'm going to show you how to work with the new string catalog and how to convert an existing project. This managing all the strings used to be quite difficult with the localizable.strings file. The new string catalogs is based on the same files, which is great because it means that you can use string catalogs also for projects that support older iOS versions. So finally, something that won't hold you back, even if you support still iOS 13. Now I am here in a completely new project, so we can really see what is tracked with string catalogs. I only have here one string that I want to localize, hello world. I'm going to create a new file, which is a string catalog. So as you see, strings files are legacy. So I use a string catalog. I use the default localizable name. Now when you create this, it first doesn't have anything in here. This is because Xcode only collects all the strings from your project once you build it. So I'm just going to build this for an iPhone. And voila, we see this one hello world text coming up. I have the default English language. I want to add 2 more languages, and you can add this with this little plus button. I'm going to choose German because at least I know what to put, and I use French. My French is not really good, and usually I try to avoid mentioning to French people because then they make me speak French. So as you see, if I now open here the German one, in this table you have the key. This is the one that I actually used in my content file here, hello world. Then the default localization in English, and then the German one, which I can use as hallo Welt. You can add a comment. This comment would come from your views. And then the last one is the state. The first time it's created, it's new state. This is how it helps you to find all the things that are missing. And once you added a translation, it creates these little check marks. And we all love little check marks. Because this is the only one that I have in this project, it tells me here that I localized everything for German because this whole file has a check mark. Whereas the French one is still a 0 because the one new string is not localized. And I'm adding here now for French, bonjour le monde. And now, once I do this, I again get here my check marks and everything. Xcode is happy and telling me I localized everything. This is the main advantage. It automatically tracks all the strings that I have in my project. I will talk a little bit later which strings it actually collects and which not. But now I don't need to manually collect all the strings. It just collects them for me. And here with this progress, I always see how much I still have to do. So super convenient in motivating myself doing this. Since now I have some strings in my project, I want to test this. And first I want to see how my translation look in the simulator. If you build and run this project, it will use the default language, which is English, and we see here hello world. Maybe I'm going to make this a little bit larger with a font of title. And also in my simulator, also in my Xcode preview, I still have here English. So how do I see in both my German translation, for example? In the simulator, you could go into the settings app and change this there, other language settings, but then it's always this language. This is a little bit more work than necessary. Alternatively, an easier way of changing the language is to go into your project under Edit Schema. Here in the Run destination, under Options, you have the app language, which is set to system language. And directly it suggests me here my 3 added languages. And I choose now German and close, and we build again. Where I see now Hallo Welt. So this is the German one, and you can do then the same with the French one. This is a lot faster than going in here settings all the time. I'm just going to go set this back to system language. Now, I'm guessing that most of the time you would, because we have the swiftui previews, the previews is actually even more interesting to see the localization. Okay, so I have now one preview for English, and I want to add here 2 more for German and French. And these languages, or how swiftui knows which language is actually there, is again in the environment with the Locale. And I can generate here a new locale, or I can change the locale from the default to use here German. And then I can also do this for French. Unfortunately, you need to put here some string values, and I always forget. No, I think it's just FR. Okay, English, hello world, German, hallo Welt. So this is with the identifier DE, and then French is with the identifier FR, and now you see here the French text. Testing this in the preview is important, for example, for German, which is a very long language, so we need a lot more words and characters to say the same thing as in English. So sometimes you just have, if you have a button, and then it just gets so much longer because the button's title is so much longer. So this is a good way of testing this directly in your views in swiftui. Okay, now that you saw me using string catalog in a new project, I want to also show this shortly for an existing project. In this project, I'm using the localizable strings file, where I have to manually keep track of all my strings. And then I have here different files to add the translation into German, for example. Keeping track of what is in these files is very annoying. So I definitely want to move on to my string catalog. Xcode can automatically migrate from these files to the new string catalog. And you simply click on the localizable file and then select migrate to string catalog. Select the localizable string. I only have here one file, migrating. I have now here my new string catalog, which automatically uses the new system, where I, instead of scrolling through my whole text, I can here directly see what is translated and what is new. Additionally, the other thing that I want to translate is actually my entries in the info plist. I need to add here another of my string catalogs. A string catalog. In order for Xcode to know that I want to translate now my info plist, I need to name this info plist. Great. So it doesn't have anything yet, because I need to build this first. Okay, great. And I have here some information in there because I added here some document types. You can also localize the display name of your apps. So this is whatever you had in the settings or in your info plist. This is super convenient to translate automatically your info plist. Same style as for my normal strings. And the nice thing is now I see here actually what my progress is and what strings I still need to localize, because I forgot quite a few, but it actually added a lot that I don't want to localize. This is because I added here a couple of demo test views that I actually don't want to localize. For example, I tested some of my accents and gradients, like in this view, because this is my personal project. I just added here a couple of demo views to test the gradients, and I used here a text of gradient 1, gradient 2, and gradient 3. So now the question is, how does Xcode select certain strings, and how can you exclude certain texts and include others? The first thing is, every time you use a swiftui view with text and you add a string, this is now treated as a string resource and localized. However, if you just use the string type, like so, it is not localized. So I'm going to add this here now for my test views, and I build and run again to see how my translation is. This should actually remove it from the string catalog. If it doesn't, you can also choose to manually delete them. Maybe it's just because I have here an older file system. So if you open the sidebar here in the attribute inspector, it is managed now automatically, and I have to choose this to manually, because this is now allowing me to select and use here this delete button. If you try to do this you need to set this first to manually before you can delete this. It's a little bit annoying because I had so many in my project, but you get the idea. You can delete this and manually work with this. I'm going back to my main project so you can better follow me what I'm doing. Here we can see what is actually moved into the string catalog. So let's do this in a new file. swiftui view, extract to string catalog example view. So if you use a text where you pass a string, as you see, this is then not localizing it. It's just named this will not be localized. Similar, if I use here a string, this will also not be localized. But if you use another initializers, and this time it's a localized string key, this will be then localized. So that's why hello world was localized. This will be localized, and I'm removing here my text. Okay. Now in my string catalog, I should see this text, but not these two. So I build and run the project, and we can check what's happening. Now in my string catalog, I have exactly one more value, which is this will be localized. So this is exactly the one that we wanted to add, whereas the other two we said this is not going to be localized. Now, usually, as you see, you don't need to really think about it if you use a text and just pass the string. Things are a little bit different if you, for example, add a text property of string. For example, you have a subview with a title. Let's just add here subview. This is struct title view with a view, and here I would want to add a text. Just passing this text, making the foreground color pink. And now if I want to use this title view, and the question is, will this be localized? And the answer is actually not, because I am here again working with strings. I said strings are not good for localization. However, if I'm changing the type, as I said, to one that is localized, like the new localized string resource, this is available for macOS 13 and iOS 16. If you need to support lower, I think you can just use localized string key. Localized string key. Let's just see if we see our text in the string catalog now. And indeed, it's showing up now. So either use this type or the new localized string resource. As you see, whenever you declare types, make them localizable. For example, if you have functions, you should always return here a localizable string key or resource, depending on what you're supporting. This text. Then also Xcode will pick this up and add it to your string catalog. This, for example, you would use when you have an enum in a picker and you want to show the titles for this enum. So just going to create a new file, swiftui view, enum example view. I'm creating a test enum, which is direction. We have north, south, east, and west. And here I want to use a picker. So this is at state private var selected direction. This is direction east. And then I want to use this with a picker. Select a direction with this selected direction. And then for the content, I need to show the text with all these options. I also need to make this here identifiable. This is var ID of type self, returning here self. And I add here case iteratable, so I get the array easy of all the cases in the for each with the directions all cases array now. Direction in. And now here I need to actually show a text. In this case, you would probably have something like a computed property in this enum saying title string switch self, saying north, south, east, and west, which I then can now here use in my enum as the title. I need to zoom in. Now I see all my 4 cases, and I want to actually localize these. I'm here using a title var with string. If you use string, as I said, this is not going to be localized, so I need to use one of my localized ones, like my localized string resource. And now if I build and run, and we check the localized strings, I indeed have here north, south, west, and east in my string catalog. Exactly what I wanted. Just pay attention to what types you're working with, because in this case, if you're wondering why certain strings don't appear in the catalog, I want to get rid here of these hello world texts. I'm going to remove them. Let me try again. I had 2, and if I go over to my string catalog now, the other one that I just deleted is removed. So usually if you delete some, they're usually removed, unless you already added a translation. For example, here my hello world I already translated. So if I remove this text, so now I wouldn't need to translate hello world. and we go to the localized string. This is now changing the state of these to stale. This means you don't use this. Stale is for strings that you previously had in your app and that you don't need anymore. This is, in this case, because you already translated them. I guess they choose, maybe you want to keep them and you accidentally had this. So you can look at the stale state. The state of your entries can be state, not found in code. So this is what I just had with deleting the hello world, but that was already translated in other languages. Then if it's new, it means it's untranslated. I have a lot of these. If it's green, it's translated, and you can also set something needs review. For example, you can right click and say mark as review, and now you change the state. Maybe you want to, this is more like marking something to see this ones. And then you can use here a tab on the state and then sort this by different states so you see all the same ones instead of sorting it by key. I'm going to add this text again as a good example. If you continue adding more and more strings, maybe your tables get a little bit long and you have the option to work with multiple tables. So for example, I can create another string catalog and name this now not the default localizable, but some extra name. Now you can imagine that because I have two tables, how does Xcode choose which table to use for which strings? And for this, we are going to use the localized string resource, which has an extra argument for specifying which table to store this. I'm just going to add this here in a separate view. I guess you would have an extra table view. So I'm using now the localized string resource where I can give a table. You can see, you can also specify maybe if the table is, if the file is in a different bundle, and you can also add this comment. Okay, maybe we start with just using the table. Okay, this string will be added to the extra string catalog because I am specifying here a different than the default string catalog, which is the localizable name, and in this case it's extra. Okay, now build this again. We have a look at this second string catalog, and indeed I get here now my extra string. This is great. It also automatically extracts and uses the same languages for all your string catalogs. Okay, this is convenient. And let's just have a look at the other argument in this localized string resource. For example, if I want to use the comment, so this is useful, for example, if you have a button in the toolbar which is a very short name. Sometimes you need to know in order to translate this properly, you need a context. So for example, here in English I would say finish. I store this in my extra table, and then I want to remind myself in the string catalog, especially if you send it to translators, in what context did we use this? And this is the button to finish a note or an exercise or whatever. That is in the toolbar. Now if I build and run this and you look at the extra table here, it actually added this comment. This is useful when we want to send this to the translators. In order to do this, we need to actually export the string catalog. So let's say I want to export this one. I go to product, export localizations. I choose the location, and then you can say which languages. In this case, I can do German myself. Just want to have somebody who does the French. So I only select here French and then export. This gives me now a localization folder with this xclog file type. This is a Xcode localization catalog. The file type means that you can open this separately with Xcode. So if I do this, I see all my XCT files, my extra, my localization text table, and here this info plist table. Now, you can, if you want to see what is in these files, you can use here show package content. If I then go to localized content, I have the XC file, which is an XML file. This you can open with a text editor and add here the translations, like for example, hello world translated to bonjour le monde with this translation state. Once you're done, Maybe let's just do this for one. For example, west would be west. So this funny spelling. And I save. And once I'm done with all the translation, you can go again in Xcode, import localizations. I select now the one that I use, import this French file, import. And it found one difference here, which is actually the one that I want. Translating west to west, import. And now it added this one translation. Very convenient. Next, I want to talk about more difficult cases where translation is not just one string value. For example, if you have to deal with plural. So in my project, I create a new file, which is plural test view. For example, you have a bookstore app and you just want to show book items, how many books you have. So this would be book count, which is you have a book count, which is an integer, like 10, and you have a store count, how many stores the app user has. And I want to show in this view a statistic or a summary of what's going on. You have, then I use my book count, 10 books in store. And then the next text in showing here the store count, stores. Now, if I build and run this, and we look at the localizable string catalog, I have now 2 entries, and Xcode automatically uses placeholders for these values. For example, here you have so-and-so books in store. Now, I need to also deal with the case where I have one book only, then I should only say book. I always go into my default language, because then it propagates it to the other ones. And here I select this entry, and add vary by plural. Now this is the default one in English, where I can say, in the case where I have only one, I say one book, and otherwise it's books. So it's already a good idea if you have only one language. And let's test this in my view. So now it says you have 10 books in store, and if I just use one, it says you have one book in store. So it uses a single. Similar, I can go into the German, and now here under the same, I can add a translation of du hast ein Buch auf Lager, and then in the plural I can say du hast number of Bücher auf Lager. Okay, going back to my plural test view, and I'm adding here another preview with the environment value for Locale, adding the German Locale. Go back in there. Okay, this is perfect. It gives me the singular for 1, and if I move to 10, it gives me multiple. Now, this works fine for if I have here one number in a text. But maybe I change my mind. I'm like, I want to have this together in one line. So I would want to have something like, you have so-and-so number of books in the number of stores. Now I need to deal with 2 numbers. 2 singular plural texts. Let's build and run to see how Xcode is handling this more advanced case. I go into my localizable string catalog in the English case, and we have here now this entry with these 2 numbers. I add here vary by plural, argument 1. Argument 1 is the books, so I rename this to books, and then I go for vary by plural and use argument 2, which I rename to stores. So now I know which one is which one. And the way I want to replace this here, because it uses this as placeholders, is I need to take out the books, because this is the plural one, and the stores string, because this is the one I can now vary here. So the first one is book. So for single, I want to say 1 book. And for the plural, I say books. If I have the first books as plural. And for the second, for stores, I do the same. 1 store. You can also leave the number, but this is just 1. And then stores. Okay. Even if you only work with English, this is already a huge advantage. Let's just test this, because this is quite a bit of if-else logic. Okay, I have 2 times the plural, and now I move to 1 book, and you have 1 book in 2 stores. And if I say 1, it says you have 1 book in 1 store. Okay, go back to plural. So it handles automatically all the in-between cases, all the 4 cases, 4 variation we have in total. And then I can do the same for my other languages, like going to German, to my variations, I can say ein Buch und Bücher. This is in multiple Geschichten. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, the sentence is, I need to do this in the proper... because German, obviously, I need to put proper grammar. So this would be, du hast ein Buch in einem Geschäft. And then the plural would be, du hast x number 10 Bücher, 10 Bücher in 10 Geschäften. Okay, at least you see the extreme case of where I have to deal with lots of grammar to make this work properly. A little bit more fine-tuning for this, but again, it works. And if I go now to my plural test in the German one, okay, it says, du hast 10 Bücher in 2 Geschäften, du hast ein Buch in 2 Geschäften, and du hast ein Buch in einem Geschäft. Okay, going back to the multiple ones. As you see, it is a little bit tricky to deal with singular, plural, and text to make this sound great, but with a little bit of just going through all the cases and reading it through, I was able to set these plurals, and string catalog helps me to deal with each of these values separately. So I can say one time I'm dealing just with singular and plural for books and one time for the other value. It is not only useful for the translation in other languages, it's also helping me to deal with plurals in English. And this used to be a lot more complicated, but now it's rather straightforward, especially because I can now easily test this and very quickly test this with my Swift, with Xcode previews in swiftui. So this is very nice. The other more advanced case that you have to deal with localizations is when you work with date. This is because the way that date is formatted is quite different for different languages, but luckily you have some more formatting options now. I have a dedicated video for how to format dates in Swift with some really nice tools that make your life a lot easier. This is also handling different localizations. I'm going to link that video up here. Let me know in the comments if you're going to use the new string catalogs, what your experience was with it, or what your problems was with it. I'm going to now continue on my own project, and let's hope it's not going to take too long. Definitely in the future it's going to save me some hassle because I can easily track what I haven't translated yet. I usually only see that I'm missing something when I run it on the simulator on the device, and I see that one certain element is not translated, and I have to go in the project and look for the string that I have to translate. So now everything is handled automatically for me. This gives me quite a bit of a peace of mind because I see, 100% is 100%. So definitely worth using string catalogs. Please give this video a like if you found it helpful and subscribe to my channel for further updates. Good luck translating your own apps. Until next time, happy coding.